At the November demonstration, his farewell to Red Square, Bukharin and his wife went to the reviewing stand for guests on his newspaper editor's press card. All at once an armed soldier came up to him. His heart stopped. They were going to do it here? At a time like this? No, the soldier saluted. Comrade Stalin is surprised at your being here. He asks you to take your place in the mausoleum. On the mausoleum. And that's the way they tossed him back and forth from hot to cold for the entire half year. On December 5th, they adopted the Bukharin Constitution with fanfare and celebrated and named it the Stalinist Constitution for all eternity. At the December plenum of the Central Committee, they brought in Pyatakov with his teeth knocked out and not a bit like himself. Behind his back stood silent Chekists. Yagoda men, and Yagoda, after all, was also being tested and prepared for a role. Pyatakov delivered himself one of the most repulsive sort of testimony against Bukharin and Rykov, both of whom were sitting right there among the leaders. Ord put his hand up to his ear. He was hard of hearing. See here, are you giving all this testimony voluntarily? Note that down. Ord will get a bullet for his own, absolutely voluntarily. And Pyatakov swayed on his feet. And during the recess, Rykov said to Bukharin, Tomsky had willpower. He understood it all back in August. And he ended his own life, while you and I, like fools, have gone on living. At this point, Kaganovich made an angry, condemnatory speech. He wanted to believe in Bukharchik's innocence, but he couldn't any longer. And then Molotov, and then Stalin. What a generous heart, what a memory for the good things. Nonetheless, I consider that Bukharin's guilt has not yet been proven. Perhaps Rykov is guilty, but not Bukharin. Someone had drawn up charges against Bukharin against his will. From cold to hot, that's how willpower collapses. That's how to grow used to the role of a ruined hero. And then they began to bring to his home day after day the records of interrogations, the depositions of young ex-students in the Institute of Red Professors of Radek, and all the rest of them. And they all provided the gravest proofs of Bukharin's black treason. They took these documents to his home, not as if he were a defendant, oh, by no means, merely in his position as a member of the Central Committee, merely for his information. Usually when he received a new batch of these materials, Bukharin would say to his 22-year-old wife, who only that spring had given him a son, You read them, I can't. And he would bury his head in his pillow. He had 2 revolvers at home. Stalin was giving him time to. And yet he did not commit suicide. It is not clear that he had grown used to this ordained role. Is it not clear? And one more public trial took place, and they shot one more of the defendants, one more batch of defendants, and yet they continued to be merciful to Bukharin. They had not taken Bukharin. At the beginning of February 1937, he decided to go on a hunger strike at home in order to force the Central Committee to hold a hearing and clear him of the charges against him. He announced in a letter to Dear Kopa, and he honestly went through with it. Then a plenum of the Central Committee was convened with the following agenda: the crimes of the Rightist Center, the anti-party conduct of Comrade Bukharin, as evidenced by his hunger strike. Bukharin hesitated. Had he perhaps really insulted the party in some particular way? Unshaven, thin, wan, already a prisoner in appearance, he dragged himself along to the plenum. What on earth were you thinking of? Dear Koba asked him cordially. But What do I do in the face of such accusations? They want to expel me from the party. Stella made a wry face at the absurdity. Come on now, no one is going to expel you from the party. Bukharin believed him and revived. He willingly assured the plenum of his repentance and immediately abandoned his hunger strike. At home he said, Come on now, cut me some sausage. Kobat said they wouldn't expel me. But in the course of the plenum, Kaganovich, Molotov, impudent fellows they were indeed, paid no attention to Stalin's opinion. Both called Bukharin a fascist hireling and demanded that he be shot. And once again Bukharin's spirits fell, and in his last days he began to compromise his letter to the future Central Committee. Committed to memory and thereby preserved, it recently became known to the whole world. However, it did not shake the world to its foundations, for what were the last words of this brilliant theoretician decided to hand down to future generations? Just one more cry of anguish and a plea to be restored to the party. He paid dearly in shame for that devotion, and one more affirmation that he fully approved everything that had happened up to and including 1937, and that included not only all the previous jeering, mocking trials jeeringly, but also the foul-smelling waves of our great prison sewage disposal system. Oh, I feel bad for him. How torturous. Even if he is one of them. And that is how he himself certified that he too deserved to plunge into those waves. So at long last he had matured to the point of being turned over to the prompters and the assistant producers. This muscular man, hunter and wrestler, in playful tussles in the presence of the Central Committee, how many times had he landed Stalin flat on his back? And this too was probably something Koba couldn't forgive him. And in the case of one so fully prepared, so demolished that no torture was called for, how is his position any stronger than that of Yakubovich in 1931? How could he not be susceptible to the same two arguments? He was in fact much weaker, because Yakubovich longed for death and Bukharin dreaded it. There remained an easy dialogue with Vyshinsky along set lines. Is it true that every opposition to the party is a struggle against the party? In general, it is. Factually, it is. But a struggle against the party cannot help but grow into a war against the party. According to the logic of things, yes, it must. And that means in the end, given the existence of oppositionist beliefs, any foul deeds, whatever, might be perpetrated against the party, espionage, murder, sellout of the motherland. But wait a minute, none were actually committed, but they could have been. Well, theoretically speaking, those are your theoreticians for you. But for us, the highest of all interests are those of the party. Yes, of course. So you see, only a very fine distinction separates us. We are required to concretize the eventuality in the interest of discrediting for the future any idea of opposition. We are required to accept as having taken place what could only theoretically have taken place. After all, it could have, couldn't it? It could have. And so it is necessary to recognize as actual what was possible. That's all. In a small philosophical transition. It's a small philosophical transition. Are we in agreement? Small? Yes, and one more thing. And it's not for me to explain to you, but if you retreat and say something different during the trial, you understand that will only play into the hands of the world bourgeoisie and will only do harm, the party harm. Well, and it's clear that in that case, you yourself will not die an easy death. But if everything goes off all right, we will, of course, allow you to go on living. We'll send you in secret to the island of Monte Cristo, and you can work economics of socialism there. But in previous trials, as I understand it, he did shoot them all. But what comparison is there between you and them? And then we also left many of them alive too. They were shot only in the newspapers. And so perhaps there isn't any insoluble riddle. Oh. It was all that same invincible theme song, persisting only with minor variations through so many different trials. After all, we are, and you are communists. How could you have gotten off track and come out against us? Repent. After all, you and we together, it's us. Historical comprehension ripens slowly in society, and when it does ripen, it is so simple. Neither in 1922 or in 1924, nor in 1937 were the defendants able to hang on to their own point of view so firmly that they could raise their heads and shout in reply to that bewitching and anesthetizing melody, "No, we are counter-revolutionaries with you. No, we are not Russians with you. No, we are not communists with you." It would seem that if only that kind of shout had been raised, all the stage sets would have collapsed, the plaster masks would have fallen off, the producer would have fled down the back stairs, and the prompters would have sneaked off to their rat holes. And out the doors it would have been, say, 1967. But even the most superbly successful of these theatrical productions was expensive and troublesome, and Stalin decided not to use open trials any longer. Or rather, in 1937, he probably did have a plan for holding public trials on a wide scale in the local districts, so the black soul of the opposition would be made visible to the masses, but he couldn't find producers who were good enough. It wasn't practical to prepare things so carefully, and the mental processes of the accused weren't so complex, and Stalin only got into a mess. Although very few people know about it, the whole plan broke down after a few trials and was abandoned. It's appropriate here to describe one such trial, the Katie case, detailed reports of which the Ivanova provincial newspapers published initially. At the end of 1934, a new local administrative district was created in the remote wilds of Ivanova province, at the point where it joined Kostroma and Nizhny Novgorod provinces, and its center was situated in the ancient, slow-moving village of Katy. New leaders were sent there from various localities, and they made one another acquaintance right in Katy. There they found a remote, sad, impoverished region, badly in need of money, machines, and intelligent economic management, but instead starved by grain procurements. It happened that Fyodor Ivanovich Smirnov, the first secretary of the district party committee, was a man with a strong sense of justice. Stavrov, the head of the district agricultural department, was a peasant through and through, and one of those peasants known as the intensivniki. In other words, the hard-working, zealous, and illiterate peasants who, in the 1920s, had run their farms on a scientific basis, for which they were at that time rewarded by the Soviet government, since it had not yet been decided that all the intensivniki must be destroyed. Because Stavrov had entered the party, he had survived the liquidation of the Gulags, and maybe he even took part in the liquidation of the Gulags. These men tried to do something for the peasants in their new district, but directives kept pouring down from above, and each one ran counter to some initiative of theirs. It was as if up there they were busy thinking up what they could do to make things worse and more desperate for the peasants. And at one point, the leaders in Katy wrote to the province leadership that it was necessary to lower the plan for procurement of bread grains because the district couldn't fulfill the plan without becoming impoverished well below the danger point. One has to recall the situation in the 30s, and maybe not only the 30s, to realize what sacrilege against the plan and what rebellion against the government this represented. But in accordance with then current style, measures were not taken directly from above, but they were left to local initiatives. When Smirnov was on vacation, his deputy, Vasily Fyodorovich Romanov, the second secretary, arranged to have a resolution passed by the district party committee. The successes of the district would have been even more brilliant if it were not for the Trotskyite Stavrov. This set in motion the individual case of Stavrov, an interesting approach, divide and rule. For the time being, Smirnov was merely to be frightened, neutralized, and compelled to retreat. There would be time enough later on to get him. And this, on a small scale, was precisely the Stalinist tactic in the Central Committee. At stormy party meetings, however, it became clear that Stavrov was about as much a Trotskyite as he was a Jesuit. The head of the district consumer cooperatives, Vasily Grigorievich Vlasov, a man with a ragtag haphazard education but one of those native talents others are so surprised to find among Russians, a born retail trade executive, eloquent, adroit in an argument, who could get fired to red heat about anything he believed to be right, tried to persuade the party meeting to expel Romanov from the party for slander. And they actually did give Romanov an official party rebuke. Romanov's last words in this dispute were typical of this kind of person, demonstrating his assurance in regard to the situation. Even though they proved Stavrov was not a Trotskyite, nonetheless, I'm sure he is a Trotskyite. The party will investigate. And it will also investigate the rebuke to me. And the party did investigate. The district NKVD arrested Stavrov almost immediately, and 1 month later they also arrested Univer, the chairman of the district executive committee and an Estonian. And Romanov took over Univer's job as chairman of the district executive committee. Stavrov was taken to the provincial NKVD, where he confessed he was a Trotskyite, that he had acted in coalition with the socialist revolutionaries all his life, that he was a member of an underground rightist organization in its district. This is a bouquet worthy of the times. The only thing missing being a connection with the Entente. Perhaps he never really did confess to these things, but no one is ever going to know, since he died from torture during interrogation in the internal prison of the Ivanovo NKVD. The pages of his deposition were there in full. Soon afterward, they arrested Smirnov, the secretary of the district party committee, as the head of the supposed rightist organization, and Stavrov, the head of the district financial department, and someone else as well. Of interest is the way in which Vlasov's fate was decided. He had only recently demanded the expulsion from the party of Romanov. Now the new chairman of the district executive committee, he had also fatally offended Rusov, the district prosecutor, as we have already reported in Chapter 4 above. He had offended Krylov, the chairman of the district NKVD, by protecting two of his energetic and resourceful executives from being arrested for supposed wrecking. Both of them had black marks on their records because of their social origins. Vlasov was hired all kinds of former people for his work. He always hired them because they mastered the business effectively and, in addition, tried hard. People promoted from the ranks of the proletariat knew nothing, and more importantly, didn't want to know anything. Nonetheless, the NKVD was prepared to make its peace with the trade cooperative. Sorokin, the deputy chairman of the district NKVD, came in person to see Vlasov with a peace proposal to give the NKVD 700 rubles worth of materials without charging them for it, and later on we will somehow write it off, the rag pickers, and that was 2 months' wages for Vlasov, who had never taken anything legally for himself. And if you don't give it to us, you are going to regret it. Vlasov kicked him out. How do you dare offer me, a communist, a deal like that? The very next day, Krylov paid a call to the district consumer cooperative, this time as a representative of the district committee of the party. This masquerade, like all these tricks, was in the spirit of 1937, and this time he ordered the convening of a party meeting. The agenda on the wrecking activities of Smirnov and Univer in the consumers' cooperatives. The report to be delivered by Comrade Vlasov. Well, no, that's a gem of a trick for you. No one at that point was making charges against Vlasov, but it would be quite enough for him to say 2 little words about wrecking activities of the former secretary of the district party committee in his Vlasov's field, and the NKVD would interrupt. And where were you? Why didn't you come to us in time? In a situation of this sort, many others would have lost their heads and allowed themselves to be trapped, but not Vlasov. He immediately replied, I won't make the report. Let Krylov make the report. After all, he arrested Smirnov and Univer and is handling their case. Krylov refused. I'm not familiar with the evidence. Vlasov replied, If even you aren't familiar with the evidence, that means they were arrested without cause. So the party meeting simply didn't take place. But how often did people dare to defend themselves? We will not have a complete picture of the atmosphere of 1937 if we lose sight of the fact that there were strong-willed people capable of difficult decisions, and if we fail to recall that late that night, T, the senior bookkeeper of the district consumer cooperative, and his deputy, N, came to Vlasov's office with 10,000 rubles. Vasily Grigorievich, get out of town tonight. Don't wait for tomorrow. Otherwise you are finished. But Vlasov thought it did not befit a communist to run away. The next morning there was a nasty article in the district paper on the work of the district consumer cooperative. One has to point out that in 1937 the press always played hand in glove with the NKVD. By evening, Vlasov had been asked to give the district party committee an accounting of his own work. Every step of the way, this was how things were in the entire Soviet Union. It would make you crazy to live in a place like that. It makes you crazy to hear about it. Thank you for listening. Take care.